The vastness of space had always been a source of mystery and curiosity for every civilization in the galaxy. Entire sectors, filled with stars, planets, and endless darkness, were still unexplored. Most species believed they knew the rules of the universe, thinking they understood their place in it. That belief changed the moment a human warship appeared, but no one saw it arrive. There was no warning, no strange signal, no sudden flare in the sky. One moment, the sector was quiet, the usual hum of star systems uninterrupted, and the next, the sensors of every nearby fleet detected something impossible. A massive object, unlike any they had seen before, was moving at speeds no known technology could achieve. Fleet commanders stared at their screens in disbelief. The readings were clear, but the data made no sense. This object was real, and it was human. Reports spread quickly. Scholars, military leaders, and diplomats all tried to understand what was happening. It must be a mistake, some whispered. No civilization could move a vessel like that, others said. But the readings didn't lie. The ship was there, massive and sleek, cutting through the darkness of space as if it owned it. Its surface was smooth, almost reflective, but sensors couldn't detect any conventional weapons. There was nothing about it that matched any known designs. Even the shape, while practical, carried an elegance that seemed purposeful, as if humans had built it to make others take notice without saying a word. On board other fleets, humans were discussed in hushed tones. Some thought they were aggressive, maybe dangerous. Others believed they were explorers, but no one could be sure. The warship did not respond to standard communications. Attempts to broadcast universal greetings, images of peace, even basic mathematical codes were ignored. Days passed, and the human vessel continued its silent journey. It did not avoid fleets, but it also did not approach them. It simply moved forward, steady and unbothered, like a predator confident in its own strength. The more the galaxy watched, the more unease grew. Humans were known to other civilizations, but only in legends and fragmented reports. Stories from distant colonies spoke of humans who survived impossible environments, who could adapt and learn faster than any other species. But seeing a human warship up close, in full strength, changed everything. Observers could feel a presence in the void, something that went beyond fear. It was respect mixed with disbelief. Military fleets tried to study it. Scouts and drones approached the human vessel, attempting to scan its systems. Every time, they were gently but firmly pushed away. There was no explosion, no warning fire. The humans seemed to anticipate every move. Observers described it as almost intelligent, not just the ship, but the humans controlling it. Their reactions were precise, calculated, and strangely calm. Every action sent a silent message: do not interfere. On board the human warship, however, there was no panic, no tension. The crew moved with quiet efficiency. Each human had a role, and each role was performed flawlessly. The ship hummed with controlled energy, a rhythm that was both calming and intimidating to those who observed it. They did not broadcast messages. They did not send signals. Their silence was deliberate. Every civilization watching began to realize something profound. The humans did not need words. Their presence alone communicated a power that could not be ignored. As the days went on, the galaxy began to speculate. Why were they here? What did humans want? Were they a threat, or were they explorers seeking contact? Each theory seemed more unlikely than the last. Nothing about the humans fit the patterns of other species. They did not behave like conquerors. They did not behave like diplomats. They simply existed, in control of themselves and their ship, moving through space with purpose, yet without aggression. The silence of the human warship created tension among the galactic councils. Leaders called emergency meetings, debated their next steps, and studied every piece of data available. Some advocated for cautious approaches, hoping to initiate contact. Others prepared fleets for possible conflict, unwilling to risk the unknown. Scholars argued endlessly about human psychology, trying to understand a species that refused to communicate in the ways everyone else did. Meanwhile, the humans continued their journey, unaffected by the growing anxiety. They passed through asteroid fields, nebulae, and even near uninhabited planets, moving with an ease that made observers question if the laws of physics applied differently to them. Every obstacle was handled with precision. Every attempt to study them was met with subtle resistance. No harm was done, but the message was clear. Humans controlled the situation entirely. Reports from distant outposts began to come in. Scientists who had observed the warship described their feelings of awe and fear. "It was like staring at a force of nature," one said. "You feel small, but not because of malice. It's because they are beyond what we can comprehend." Pilots who tried to approach it described a strange calmness that enveloped their ships, almost as if the human presence reassured and warned at the same time. The more the galaxy observed, the more humans became a mystery. No records explained their technology. No treaties accounted for their behavior. Every civilization had rules for interaction, for warfare, for diplomacy, but humans ignored them all. Their warship was not just a vessel. It was a statement of strength, independence, and an unspoken challenge. We are here, and we do not need to prove ourselves. By the end of the first week, it became clear that no conventional approach would work. Humans were not predictable. They did not act out of fear or desire for recognition. They were calm, confident, and completely in control. For the first time, the galaxy understood that power did not always need to be declared. Sometimes, presence alone could speak louder than words, louder than fleets, louder than councils. Stories of the human warship spread from sector to sector, inspiring fear, respect, and endless speculation. Pilots, scholars, and leaders alike tried to imagine what the humans wanted, but all they had were observations. There were no messages, no warnings, no ultimatums. Just a ship moving silently through the void, and humans aboard who seemed completely unconcerned with the chaos their presence caused. And so, the galaxy waited. Some prepared for the worst, building fleets and strategies. Some hoped for contact, sending messages that went unanswered. All watched as the human warship continued its path, a silent enigma moving through space. It was the beginning of a story no one could fully understand yet, but everyone knew it would change the galaxy forever. The first contact had already happened. The humans had arrived, and the galaxy was silent, not because it had no voice, but because it realized, perhaps too late, that words were unnecessary. Humans did not need to speak. They were already sending a message everyone would remember. The moment the human warship entered the sector, every civilization wanted to know one thing. What did the humans want? Scientists, diplomats, and military commanders all tried to send messages, hoping for some kind of response. They used every method available: light signals, sound pulses, encoded transmissions, and even symbolic representations of peace and curiosity. They broadcasted images of their worlds, maps of known space, and messages in every known universal code. But the humans didn't answer. They didn't acknowledge any signals. At first, some fleets thought it was a technical error. Maybe the humans couldn't receive the messages. Maybe their systems were different, or their technology incompatible with known standards. They tried again and again. Days passed, and still there was no response. The human warship continued its path through space, calm and unbothered, completely ignoring the frantic attempts at communication. This silence was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Other species had always responded in some way, even if only to reject communication or issue a threat. Humans did neither. They did not wave a warning, they did not broadcast a challenge, and they did not initiate dialogue. Observers began to realize that silence, in this case, was deliberate. It was not a failure of communication. It was a message itself. Galactic scholars began to analyze the situation from every angle. They studied human history, human behavior, and human psychology, piecing together reports from distant colonies where humans had settled. There were stories of humans surviving extreme conditions on frozen planets, in deserts without water, or even in toxic environments where other species could not survive. They were adaptable, resourceful, and resilient. Perhaps their silence was a reflection of their confidence. Perhaps they did not need to answer because they knew their presence alone spoke volumes. Meanwhile, military leaders grew impatient. They saw the humans as a potential threat, a moving unknown that could not be contained. Squadrons were prepared to intercept the warship, to force contact if necessary. Fleets moved into position, sensors scanning the human vessel for weaknesses, yet every approach failed. The human ship maneuvered with precision, avoiding conflict without firing a single shot. Every attempt to corner or intimidate, it was countered effortlessly. Observers began to note that the humans seemed to anticipate their moves, almost as if they were always one step ahead. The silence became a tool of strategy. Other civilizations started to feel uneasy. They had never encountered a species that could assert control without aggression, that could communicate power without saying a single word. Pilots reported a strange sensation when near the human vessel, a mix of awe, fear, and an unspoken warning. It was as if the humans were saying, without speaking, "Do not test us. You will regret it." Diplomats tried a different approach. They sent messages emphasizing friendship, curiosity, and peace. They offered trade, knowledge, and alliances. They showed humans images of their worlds, their cultures, and even their leaders. Yet still, there was no response. The humans neither accepted nor rejected these overtures. They simply continued their silent journey. As the silence persisted, the galaxy's collective anxiety grew. Some feared that humans were preparing for an attack, even though no action had been taken. Others wondered if humans were testing them, observing how other civilizations reacted. Every fleet and every council became hyper-aware of human movements. Every transmission, every maneuver, every minor gesture was studied for hidden meaning. Analysts pored over every detail, trying to find clues in the human warship's speed, direction, and course. Despite the tension, there were those who admired the humans. Scholars and philosophers began to reflect on the nature of their silence. In a galaxy filled with noise, diplomacy, and constant chatter, humans had chosen a different path. They communicated not with words or gestures, but with presence. Their warship moved through space like a statement of confidence and control. It was a reminder that true strength did not always need to be shouted or displayed. Sometimes it was enough simply to exist with certainty. Reports from pilots and scouts added to the growing legend. Those who attempted closer observation often described feeling a strange calm as they approached the human vessel. Some said it was almost hypnotic, a quiet authority that commanded respect. No sensors could explain it. No analysis could quantify it. The humans had created an atmosphere, a silent presence that affected the minds of those around them. Even among the most aggressive species, the silence of the humans forced reconsideration. Fleets that would normally engage in preemptive strikes hesitated. No one wanted to be the first to provoke a response from a species that had already demonstrated capabilities beyond comprehension. Their warship had not fired a weapon, but the potential for devastating force was evident. It was the ultimate deterrent, calm, controlled, and completely unreadable. Meanwhile, on the human warship, life went on as normal. The crew worked with quiet efficiency, performing tasks and maintaining the vessel without any sense of urgency or concern. There was no fear, no panic, and no aggression. They were humans. Acting as humans always had focused on their mission, confident in their abilities, and unconcerned with the reactions of others. The contrast between the calm humans and the anxious galaxy could not have been more stark. As weeks turned into a month, more civilizations joined the observation effort. Scholars, military strategists, and diplomats all tried to interpret the silence. Conferences were held, simulations ran, and theories were debated. Was this a test? Were humans indifferent to the rest of the galaxy? Or was this simply the way humans had always operated, unpredictable, capable, and confident in themselves? No one could agree. Finally, a pattern began to emerge. Humans did not respond to threats. They did not respond to greetings. They did not respond to attempts at negotiation, but they were not reckless. Every action was deliberate, every movement controlled. Observers realized that humans did not need words because their actions already carried meaning. Silence, in this case, was not emptiness, it was clarity. It was a statement of power, a signal of confidence, and a challenge that no one could ignore. By the end of the second part of this encounter, the galaxy had begun to change. Plans were altered. Fleets were repositioned. Councils debated new policies, and alliances shifted. Humans had not spoken, but they had already influenced the way the galaxy operated. They had demonstrated that words were not always necessary, that sometimes the mere presence of a capable, confident species was enough to demand respect. The first attempts at communication had failed. The humans had remained silent. But in that silence, a message had been delivered, one that would echo through the galaxy for years to come. The humans were here, and they were unlike anything anyone had ever faced. They did not need to explain themselves, because their actions, calm and precise, said everything. And so, civilizations waited and watched, trying to understand a species that had chosen silence over words, presence over speech, and confidence over uncertainty. The humans had arrived, and in their quiet way, they had already left an impression that no one would forget. Tension across the galaxy reached a new high when the human warship, still silent and calm, encountered its first hostile fleets. For years, many civilizations had relied on their strength, their numbers, and their advanced technology to maintain control over space sectors. They believed that threats could always be countered with force. But nothing in history had prepared them for humans. It started with a single patrol fleet. The fleet had been ordered to intercept the human warship and determine its intentions. When the ships approached, their weapon systems were activated, their shields raised, and every crew member braced for combat. But the humans did not engage. They did not fire. They did not respond. Instead, their warship moved with calculated precision, as if it could read the exact movements of every vessel around it. In an instant, the first strike came not from the humans, but from their defensive systems. A single pulse of energy, almost invisible, disabled the engines of the closest enemy ships. No explosions, no destruction, just a quiet, flawless shutdown of their systems. Panic spread among the hostile fleet. Pilots tried to maneuver, but every attempt failed. Their weapons were useless. Their shields were bypassed. They could not understand how a single ship, unmoving and silent, could render their fleet powerless. Word of the event spread like wildfire. Military commanders in neighboring sectors watched in disbelief as reports poured in. Entire squadrons had been neutralized without a single human casualty, without a single shot fired in anger. The humans had demonstrated their capability, but they had done so without aggression. Their actions were precise, controlled, and terrifying in their simplicity. It was not just technology, it was strategy, planning, and execution at a level no other species had ever achieved. As the days went on, more fleets attempted to challenge the human warship. each believing they could succeed where others had failed. But every effort ended the same way. Human defenses adapted to every maneuver, countering attacks before they could even be completed. Observers began to notice a pattern. The humans did not attack first, but they could stop any threat with unmatched efficiency. Their warship was not a weapon of chaos. It was a tool of perfect control. Diplomats and strategists scrambled to understand the human approach. Analysts dissected every encounter, every movement, and every outcome. What they discovered was unsettling. Humans did not rely solely on firepower. They relied on anticipation, precision, and an understanding of their opponents that seemed almost intuitive. No fleet could hide a weakness. No strategy could surprise them. Every action taken against the humans was met with a response that was perfectly timed, perfectly measured, and perfectly effective. Despite this, the humans remained calm. Their warship continued its silent journey, never seeking conflict, never pursuing victory. They did not celebrate their successes. They did not gloat. They simply existed in control of themselves and the situation. This calmness was unnerving to other civilizations. In a galaxy where aggression and posturing were common, humans displayed a confidence that could not be shaken, a certainty that could not be challenged, that the demonstration of power forced a new understanding. Military leaders who had once believed in overwhelming force realized that conventional tactics were useless against humans. Fleets that had relied on numbers now understood that a single human warship could neutralize them all. Plans were rewritten. Strategies were reconsidered. Alliances were reconsidered. Humans had not declared war, but they had changed the rules of engagement forever. Civilian populations also took notice. People across the galaxy watched the events unfold through news networks and data streams. Fear mixed with awe as stories emerged of entire fleets being rendered harmless without destruction, of pilots returning shaken but unharmed, and of the humans continuing their journey without pause. Humans were not invincible, but their approach to conflict made them untouchable by conventional standards. In response, scholars and philosophers began to debate the meaning of what had occurred. What did it say about humanity that they could control a situation so completely without resorting to violence? Some argued that humans valued efficiency over aggression, that their strength lay not in conquest, but in mastery of technology and strategy. Others suggested a deeper truth. Humans did not need to fight because their presence alone commanded respect. The very idea of provoking them had become unthinkable. As more hostile encounters were reported, the legend of the human warship grew. It became clear that humans were not interested in conquest. They did not seek to dominate or control. They were simply confident in their ability to handle threats, and they had demonstrated that capability in the most undeniable way possible. Entire civilizations began to shift their policies, no longer relying on brute force to maintain security. Humans had taught a lesson in restraint, precision, and the power of anticipation. Observers also noted that humans seemed to have an understanding of tactics that was beyond conventional calculation. Their decisions were not random, and they did not rely on sheer firepower alone. It was as if they could see the possible outcomes of every scenario and act in a way that maximized control while minimizing unnecessary action. Every movement of their warship was deliberate, purposeful, and precise. There was no waste, no hesitation, no error. This realization caused both fear and admiration. Commanders who had once felt confident in their fleets now approached human encounters with extreme caution. Scientists and engineers studied the technology, hoping to understand how humans achieved such results. Philosophers pondered the meaning of human restraint and control. The galaxy slowly began to understand that humans operated on a level that was different, not just in technology, but in thought, in strategy, and in confidence. Even allies of the hostile fleets took notice. Some sent messages of curiosity, attempting to learn from humans, to understand their methods, and to predict their next moves. Others began to distance themselves, unwilling to risk angering a species whose power was now undeniable. The human warship did not force respect. It commanded it simply by existing. Moving through space with purpose and control. By the end of the third part of the encounter, the galaxy's perspective on humans had shifted completely. They were no longer seen as distant legends or unknown explorers. They were a force to be respected, studied, and cautiously observed. Their silence, combined with the flawless demonstration of power, had created an aura that was both intimidating and awe-inspiring. The humans had proven that words were not necessary, that aggression was not required, and that control could be maintained through mastery of technology and strategy. They had shown that restraint could be more powerful than attack, and that confidence could silence even the most aggressive opponents. Every fleet, every commander, and every civilization had learned a simple but profound truth: underestimate humans, and you risk complete and total failure. And so, the human warship continued its journey, calm and unbothered, leaving behind a galaxy that had been forever changed. They had arrived, demonstrated power beyond imagination, and yet had done so without raising a single weapon in anger. The story of that first display of human capability spread across star systems, becoming legend almost instantly. Every encounter was studied, every movement analyzed, and every action remembered. Humans had not only changed the way battles were fought, they had changed the way the galaxy thought about power, control, and presence. They were silent, precise, and terrifyingly effective. And the galaxy, for the first time, understood that humans were not a species to be taken lightly. The more time the human warship spent in the sector, the more the galaxy struggled to understand it. Weeks had passed since the first contact, and humans had yet to communicate, yet every civilization knew they were there. They observed the humans silently moving through space, calm and deliberate, as if nothing in the galaxy could affect them. The warship did not attack, did not flee, and did not respond to any attempt at communication. It simply existed, a silent presence that unsettled and fascinated everyone watching. Galactic councils held emergency meetings. Leaders from dozens of species debated endlessly. What did the humans want? Why were they here? Were they observing, testing, or planning something no one could predict? No one had an answer. The silence of the human warship was maddening. It left every civilization questioning their own assumptions and strategies. Scholars studied the humans' movements, pilots tracked every maneuver, and diplomats sent messages that were never answered. As days turned into weeks, a strange realization spread. Humans did not need to explain themselves. Their presence alone carried meaning. Other civilizations were used to communication, negotiation, and threats. Messages were sent and received, treaties signed, and wars declared. Humans operated differently. They did not need words. They did not need negotiations. They did not need threats. Everything about them conveyed control, confidence, and understanding. Their silence was deliberate. It was a choice, and it was powerful. Observers noted that the humans did not act aggressively, but they were prepared for anything. Scouts who tried to get closer to the warship reported that it moved with a precision it was almost impossible to comprehend. It seemed to anticipate every move, every tactic, and every maneuver. No trap could catch it. No attack could surprise it. Even in the most dangerous parts of space, the humans remained calm and in control. There was no panic, no haste, no wasted effort. Everything was done with purpose. The human silence began to have a psychological effect across the galaxy. Pilots reported a strange feeling when near the ship. Some described it as a weight, as if the ship carried authority that could not be challenged. Others said it was like a calm that was almost hypnotic, a quiet certainty that made hesitation feel dangerous. Scholars debated these effects, trying to understand if humans possessed some unique mental ability, or if it was simply the way they carried themselves, confident and unshakable. Meanwhile, the human warship continued its journey, passing through asteroid fields, near uninhabited planets, and around nebulae, without altering course unnecessarily. Every movement was efficient and purposeful. Observers began to see a pattern. Humans did not waste energy or effort. They were patient, strategic, and deliberate. They had no need to react to provocation because they already controlled the situation. Civilians and military personnel across multiple civilizations began to share the same uneasy conclusion. Humans were not just strong, they were wise in their strength. Attempts to communicate continued, but no message was returned. Transmissions were sent in multiple languages, with universal codes and symbols representing peace, curiosity, and even surrender. Every effort was met with silence. This silence was not passive, it was active. Humans were not ignoring the galaxy out of weakness or incompetence. They were choosing not to respond. And the more civilizations realized this, the more the silence itself became a source of respect and fear. Some leaders tried a more cautious approach. They studied the humans from a distance, sending observation drones and monitoring the warship without trying to interfere. They began to understand that humans were not predictable in the ways other species were. There was no pattern to aggression, because humans did not behave aggressively. There was no predictable negotiation, because humans did not negotiate like others. Every move had to be interpreted carefully, and even then, certainty was impossible. Civilizations that had once relied on brute, forced to maintain control, began to reconsider their strategies. They realized that humans operated on a level beyond conventional understanding. A single human warship had demonstrated the ability to neutralize entire fleets without firing a single weapon in anger. The galaxy had never faced anything like this before. Other species had relied on fear, force, and diplomacy. Humans relied on presence, mastery, and restraint. The silence of the humans also forced reflection on a deeper level. Philosophers, historians, and scientists all began to ask questions about the nature of humanity itself. Why did they act this way? What did it say about their values, their culture, and their understanding of power? Observers began to see a pattern in human behavior. They did not seek dominance. They did not seek fame. They did not seek unnecessary conflict. Their strength was in their mastery and their patience. Their silence was a reflection of confidence, not indifference. The longer the warship remained in the sector, the more the galaxy began to adapt. Fleets were repositioned, protocols rewritten, and alliances reconsidered. Humans had not attacked, but their presence alone was reshaping the way civilizations operated. The warship had become a silent teacher, demonstrating that power was not about numbers or aggression, but about control, patience, and understanding. Pilots who flew near the warship described the experience as life-changing. They spoke of a calm, almost magnetic authority that humans projected. Some said they felt nervous approaching the ship, not because it posed an immediate threat, but because it conveyed that any misstep would be noticed and corrected. Civilians, scholars, and politicians all began to agree that humans were unlike any species they had encountered. And yet, the humans themselves remained unaffected by the attention. Life aboard the warship continued as it always had, focused, efficient, and calm. There was no pride, no celebration, no hint that they understood the panic and awe they had inspired. They did not seek recognition. They did not need it. Their presence alone was enough to teach a lesson that would be remembered for generations. By the end of this period, it became clear that the human silence was more than a refusal to communicate. It was a strategy, a philosophy, and a demonstration of confidence. The galaxy had tried to define them, to understand them, to control them, but humans refused to fit any known pattern. They did not rely on threats, treaties, or diplomacy. They relied on mastery, restraint, and presence. And in doing so, they had become a force that no civilization could ignore. As weeks turned into months, the humans' journey through the sector continued. Every fleet, every council, and every observer had learned the same lesson. Humans communicated through silence, and that silence was more powerful than any weapon. It forced reflection, respect, and caution. It demanded attention, not through words, but through confidence and control. Humans had arrived, and in their quiet, deliberate way, they had already changed the galaxy forever. The warship moved forward, calm and unbothered, leaving behind fleets that were awed and terrified, scholars that were puzzled, and civilizations that had begun to rethink everything they knew about power, control, and communication. The humans had not spoken a word, but their message was unmistakable. Underestimate us, and you will regret it. Act rashly, and the consequences will be beyond comprehension. The galaxy was learning, slowly and unwillingly, that silence could be more commanding than words, and that humans were a species that could never be fully predicted or controlled. And so, as the human warship drifted silently through space, the galaxy watched, wondered, and learned. The first lesson was clear. Humans were not like any other species. They were patient, they were powerful, and their silence spoke louder than any battle cry. By the time the human warship had spent several weeks in the sector, the galaxy had begun to change. Every civilization that had observed it, every fleet that had tried to intercept it, and every scholar who had studied it realized something extraordinary. Humans were unlike any other species they had encountered. They were not aggressive conquerors. They were not boastful diplomats. They were a force that relied on control, presence, and quiet confidence. And it was shaking the very foundation of how civilizations viewed power. Reports of the human warship's movements were now being analyzed at the highest levels. Military commanders, who had once relied on fleets of hundreds of ships, realized that a single human vessel had already rendered them ineffective. Entire strategies had been rewritten in a matter of days. Fleet formations, attack plans, and even territorial claims were being reconsidered. The humans had demonstrated that conventional methods no longer applied. The galaxy was being forced to adapt, not because humans demanded it, but because their presence alone made it necessary. Diplomats and council members debated what could be done. Some argued that humans should be approached with extreme caution, offering friendship in the hopes of understanding their intentions. Others felt that humans should be avoided altogether, their capabilities too unpredictable to risk confrontation. No one knew what humans wanted, and that uncertainty created both fear and awe. It became clear that humanity was a species that could not be judged by traditional measures. The humans' silence was becoming legendary. Scholars and historians studied the pattern of their behavior, trying to find meaning in every action and inaction. They noted that humans did not act rashly, they did not react emotionally, and they did not seek to intimidate unnecessarily. Every movement was calculated, every decision deliberate. Humans had proven that restraint could be more powerful than aggression, and that calm confidence could inspire fear, even without a single word or weapon fired. Stories of encounters with the human warship spread quickly. Pilots who had observed the ship reported feelings of awe and unease. Fleet officers recounted how humans seemed to anticipate their every move, neutralizing potential threats before they even became dangerous. Scholars debated whether this was advanced technology, instinct, or something deeper, a reflection of human intelligence and discipline. Everywhere in the galaxy, people began to realize that humans were not merely powerful, they were exceptional. Even allied civilizations, those not directly threatened by the human vessel, began to adjust their behavior. Fleets were repositioned, observation protocols were updated, and strategies were revised. Humans had shown that presence alone could alter the dynamics of power. Their warship had not fired aggressively, had not demanded recognition, but had demonstrated an ability to control outcomes without confrontation. That quiet mastery left a lasting impression on everyone who observed it. The psychological impact on the galaxy was profound. Civilizations that had once believed themselves invincible suddenly felt fragile. Leaders who had relied on fear and dominance realized that humans operated on a level that made traditional tactics obsolete. Humans did not rely on intimidation because they were confident enough not to need it. They did not rely on words because their actions already communicated everything necessary. Their warship was not just a tool of defense, it was a statement, and it changed how the galaxy viewed strength. Scientists and engineers studied the human technology, attempting to replicate it. Pilots and strategists studied their behavior, attempting to anticipate their decisions. Philosophers and scholars studied their actions, attempting to understand their mindset. Every observation led to a new realization. Humans were not only advanced in technology, but they had mastered the art of restraint and control. They were capable of immense power, yet they wielded it wisely. The galaxy had rarely, if ever, encountered such a combination. Civilizations began to reconsider their interactions with humans. Previously hostile species approached cautiously, unsure whether humans could be reasoned with. Trade agreements, exploration protocols, and territorial boundaries were all reconsidered in light of the humans' capabilities. No one wanted to provoke a species that had already demonstrated that it could neutralize threats with precision and without aggression. Humans had not declared war, but they had altered the balance of power simply by existing. Pilots who flew near the human warship described an experience that went beyond fear. Some said it was humbling, a reminder of the limits of their own knowledge and abilities. Others said it was inspiring, a lesson in confidence and discipline. Even those who had once been dismissive of humans began to acknowledge their extraordinary nature. Across the galaxy, the consensus was growing. Humans were not just powerful, they were beyond comparison. Governments and councils began to rethink their policies. Fleets that had relied on overwhelming numbers realized that they needed new strategies. Diplomats that had relied on negotiation and intimidation realized that humans did not respond to conventional methods. The presence of humans forced a re-evaluation of everything the galaxy had relied upon. Humans were not aggressive, but they were decisive. They did not react to provocation, but they neutralized potential threats with precision. And the galaxy, slowly but surely, began to respect and fear the consequences of underestimating them. Even scholars who focused on culture and philosophy noted the uniqueness of humans. Their restraint, intelligence, and confidence seemed almost paradoxical. They could be powerful without being violent. They could assert control without demanding attention. They could command respect without speaking. In every sense, humans were teaching the galaxy a new lesson, one that had no precedent and could not be ignored. The humans' journey through the sector continued, calm, uninterrupted. Their warship moved with purpose, observing, passing by, yet never interfering unnecessarily. Civilians and military personnel alike watched in fascination. Humans had become a symbol, a reminder that power and influence were not always measured by aggression or numbers, but by mastery, patience, and confidence. By the end of this stage, the galaxy had reached a new understanding. Humans were no longer a distant curiosity. They were a force that demanded attention, respect, and caution. Every civilization had learned a similar lesson. Underestimate humans at your own risk. Humans were not only capable, they were exceptional, unpredictable, and beyond the galaxy's previous measures of power. As weeks turned into months, humans continued to silently traverse the sector. Their warship left no destruction, no chaos, no unnecessary conflict. Yet the impact of their presence was undeniable. The galaxy had been forced to reassess itself, its assumptions, and its strategies. Humans had arrived, not with words or declarations, but with actions and presence that communicated everything that needed to be understood. The lesson was clear. Humans did not seek dominance or confrontation. They did not demand recognition or submission. They simply existed, confident in their capabilities, patient in their actions, and precise in their execution. And through their silence, they had taught the galaxy something profound, that true power often speaks without words, that restraint can be more commanding than aggression, and that confidence can leave a lasting impression, even without a single spoken sentence. Civilizations across the galaxy would remember this for generations. Humans had arrived quietly, acted decisively, and left a permanent mark on how the galaxy perceived strength, control, and presence. Their warship had not merely traveled through space. It had traveled through the hearts and minds of every civilization, forcing them to rethink what it meant to be powerful, capable, and respected. The human warship had now traveled far through the sector, moving with the same calm, deliberate precision that had defined its entire journey. Weeks had passed, and its presence had already reshaped the way civilizations thought about power, control, and influence. The galaxy was no longer the same. Fleets had repositioned, councils had rewritten strategies, and scholars had begun studying humans not as a distant species, but as a benchmark for what was possible when mastery and restraint were combined. No one could predict where the human warship would go next. Its path was deliberate, yet unannounced. Every civilization in the vicinity watched, wondering if contact would be made, if a message would finally be sent, or if the humans would simply continue their silent passage through space. But the humans did not answer questions, and they did not seek attention. Their silence was absolute, yet it carried a meaning that resonated throughout the galaxy. By now, stories of the human warship had become legend. Pilots, commanders, and civilians alike shared accounts of the vessel's calm authority, its precision, and the strange sense of awe it inspired. Observers spoke of the quiet that followed in its wake, a calm that was both unsettling and commanding. Even those who had once doubted the significance of humans could not ignore the undeniable effect of their presence. Humans were no longer a curiosity, they were a force, one that had redefined the rules of interaction in the galaxy. The galaxy had learned many lessons from the humans, perhaps none more important than the power of restraint. For centuries, civilizations had believed that strength was measured by aggression, numbers, and firepower. Humans had proven otherwise. They had neutralized threats without firing weapons aggressively. They had commanded attention without issuing orders. They had influenced outcomes without speech or negotiation. Their warship was not just a vessel. It was a symbol of confidence, mastery, and subtle authority. Even after weeks of observation, humans had not caused harm unnecessarily. They had passed through asteroid belts with ease, avoided collisions, and navigated dangerous sectors with precision. Every movement demonstrated an understanding of the universe that seemed beyond conventional comprehension. Scholars debated whether it was superior technology, human intelligence, or a combination of both. The truth seemed clear. Humans had mastered not only tools and machines, but also themselves. Their calm confidence made them untouchable by conventional standards. Civilizations began to shift the way they viewed potential threats. Military leaders who had once relied on overwhelming numbers now realized that a single, disciplined force could be more effective than thousands of scattered ships. Diplomats who had relied on negotiation and intimidation now understood that influence could come from confidence and presence alone. The humans had taught the galaxy a lesson that could not be ignored. Sometimes, the quietest actions were the most powerful. As the human warship continued its journey, it left behind a legacy that extended beyond military or strategic lessons. Philosophers, historians, and scholars began studying the implications of their behavior. What did it mean for a species to operate without unnecessary aggression? How could confidence and restraint be more effective than fear and threats? Humans had introduced a new philosophy into the galaxy, that power did not require display, that mastery did not require noise, and that presence alone could command respect. Even fleets that had not directly encountered the humans began to feel their influence. Observers reported that the atmosphere in council meetings and strategic planning sessions had changed. Conversations were more cautious, decisions more deliberate, and every plan now considered the possibility of human intervention. The humans had not demanded attention, yet their influence was undeniable. Their silence had become a force in itself, reshaping behavior, policy, and thought across multiple civilizations. The psychological impact of the humans' presence was profound. Pilots, engineers, and civilians all reported similar experiences. A quiet awe, a sense of respect, and a recognition of the humans' mastery. Some said it was humbling, reminding them of the limits of their knowledge and abilities. Others said it was inspiring, a demonstration of what was possible when discipline, patience, and intelligence were combined. Across the galaxy, humans had become a symbol of excellence, a benchmark for others to aspire to. And yet, humans did not seek recognition. They did not boast, they did not celebrate, and they did not communicate their intentions. Their warship moved quietly, efficiently, and purposefully. Every action was deliberate, every decision precise. They had demonstrated the power to neutralize threats and influence outcomes, but they had done so without ego, without arrogance, and without unnecessary display. Their legacy was not built on noise or conquest, was built on mastery and presence. Civilizations began to document their encounters with humans, creating records, studies, and theories. Pilots described the precision of their maneuvers. Commanders analyzed the strategies humans used to neutralize threats without unnecessary destruction. Scholars debated the philosophy behind the restraint and confidence. The galaxy realized that humans had redefined what it meant to be powerful. Strength was not about dominance or aggression, but about control, foresight, and understanding. By the end of this stage, humans had passed beyond the sector, continuing their journey silently. Their warship left behind fleets, councils, and scholars who were wiser, more cautious, and more respectful of a species that had demonstrated what mastery truly meant. Humans had not needed to speak, to threaten, or to attack. They had communicated everything through action, presence, and restraint. Their silence was the most powerful message the galaxy had ever received. The legacy of the human warship was clear. Every civilization that had observed it carried a new understanding of strength and influence. Humans had shown that control could be more powerful than aggression, that silence could communicate more than words, and that confidence could inspire awe without any need for demonstration. They had left a permanent mark on the galaxy, not through destruction, but through the quiet authority of their presence. As the human warship continued on its path, the galaxy reflected on what it had learned. For generations to come, civilizations would study the humans, attempt to understand their mastery, and learn from their restraint. Humans had proven that power was not measured by the loudest actions or the largest fleets, but by the ability to act decisively, efficiently, and with purpose. They had arrived quietly, acted deliberately, and left a lasting impact that would shape the galaxy forever. The humans had arrived, remained silent, demonstrated unmatched capability, and then continued their journey, leaving the galaxy to adapt and learn. Their presence had taught lessons that words could never convey, and their silence had spoken louder than any speech ever could. The galaxy had been forever changed, not by war, not by threats, and not by loud displays, but by humans who understood that the greatest power often lies in patience, confidence, and mastery. In the end, the human warship became more than a vessel. It became a symbol, a story, and a standard for the galaxy. Humans had arrived, left no words, yet their message was clear and unforgettable. Underestimate us, and you risk everything. Observe us carefully, and you will learn the meaning of true strength. Their legacy was not one of destruction, but one of understanding, respect, and awe, a lesson the galaxy would carry forever.